When is a drum track not a drum track? When you swap the drums for melodic samples. In this half-assed tutorial, I'm going to show you how to set up the MC-101 to make a kind of rudimentary generative AI. It takes a little bit of work, but think of it as writing a prompt to define the parameters for the music that you want your AI to generate. And if you wait to the end, I'll show you the secret on saving clips so that you can load them again at a later date. The secret to this technique on the MC-101 is the drum tracks. The drum tracks on the MC-101 have really good probability parameters, and they can be used in all kinds of creative ways. The other thing that you need to think about is how you use mute groups, because that will help to define the parameters by which your AI prompt will work. But before we do any of that, we need to get some kind of melody line. So I'm going to head to my guitar. After some half-assed noodling, where I was kind of feeling around for riffs and melodic patterns that I could use to chop up, I then get back to Audacity and find a section of that guitar playing that I can chop up into 8 sections. Which I can use on the MC-101. Once you have your 8 samples selected, copy them onto an SD card. Make sure you label them so you can find them when you're scrolling through the menus on the MC-101 to lay them out on 8 separate pads. We're going to begin by starting a new project. And once that new project is loaded up, you can either use the drum track which is set up on track 1 by default, or use track 3 to set up a new instrument. Make sure you choose the drum track rather than the tone tracks. You need the drum track because the tone tracks do not deal with probabilities in the same way. Once we have our drum track selected, we now need to load samples onto the individual pads. And this can be quite a quick process once you've got the routine going. Press Shift and the first pad that you want to load samples onto. I tend to use the bottom row, so that would be Shift and pad number 9. Scroll to the WAV file and click on the value dial in order to select that. Then navigate through the folders to the directory where you saved your 8 samples and select the first sample. Click and that will lay it onto the pad. Then you click on the next pad, which would be number 10. Scroll up the sample, just one, click the value dial, and you've loaded the second sample onto the second pad you're going to use. Then pad 3, and then pad 4 and pad 5, and so on until you've got all of your 8 samples loaded onto 8 separate pads. The next most important thing in setting this up is to select mute groups. So once again you press Shift and one of the pads that's got your samples on, and you scroll through until you get to pad edit. Once you've selected pad edit by clicking on the value dial, you scroll up until you get to mute group. Click on mute group and you will see that the cursor skips to where it says off. Rotate that until it says 1 and then just select the next pad, and you'll notice that where it says mute group, it goes to off. Just click to select it, put it up to 1. Next pad, click to select, dial it up to 1 until all of the pads that have got your samples on are in the same mute group. And obviously 1 is the first one to use. The mute group will cut off the previous sample from playing once it's triggered. And it's quite an important concept. I mean, if you wanted a polyphonic instrument, then you could quite easily leave this mute grouping step aside, but sometimes you find that the sounds clash. One of the things you have to understand about the mute grouping is how the priorities work. Because if you were to set 2 pads in the same mute group together, only one of them would sound. It's the way that the MC-101 prioritises the pads in the mute group which dictate which sound you will hear. I can demonstrate this if I set a group of 8 pads with the numbers 1 through to 8.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8.
Now, if I set up pad 1 on the first step, you can hear when it loops round, it counts 1.
1.
Now, if I put pad 2 on,
2.
And I set it to the same step in the sequence, you can hear that you'll only hear 2. And if I put 3 on,
3.
You will hear that it only says 3. So all of the previous numbers have been cut off. And this is because the highest pad value number takes priority and is the pad which is heard. Really quickly, we're going to go back to our clip, which has got our new melodic drum kit set up. And we're going to save that because we'll come back and we'll use that at a later date. So that the way that you save patches that you've worked on are through clips. And in order to save clips, you press Shift and the clip button, and you scroll through the clip menu until you get to the end and it says Save Clip. Click on that one with the value dial and then name it using the value dial and the forward and back buttons for bars in a loop. Make sure the name you pick is quite appropriate so that you can find it at a later date. Okay, I'm going to stop there now. And if you want to see how we can load that patch back up and use it to make generative music, you'll need to come back to the next video that I upload. So make sure you subscribe if you're interested, and make sure you turn on the notifications, otherwise you might not get told when that one's uploaded. And while you're here, click the like button, and in the words of the Sirius Cybernetics Corporation, share and enjoy.